thank you. By the way, to have Dave come all the way out here to hear me, that's wonderful. Thank you. I had a lot of pressure there. Usually people stay away when I talk, so nice to have the reverse going on. Well, first of all, thank you, Barbara, for having me, and thank you for the. She's such a good writer. She does the publicity write-ups, and it makes me and my topic sound a lot more interesting and impressive. She actually, also when I was earlier this week, I was trying to figure out what I was going to talk about. The truth is, planning commission business is kind of dry and boring a lot of the time. And I was looking over a lot of these things that I was thinking and wondering if I should talk about this or that, and a lot of it just seemed too dull. But Barbara's write-up on the publicity write-up was actually a lot more interesting than the stuff we were doing. I ended up taking a lot from her write-up, a lot of ideas that she suggested. So she may actually know a little bit more about a couple of these things than I do. But anyway, yeah, first a little background. I was a planning commissioner for 8 years in Pacifica, which I think is longer than anyone's ever been allowed to be planning commissioner for. I think they instituted term limits here because of me, including 3 years as commission chairman here, and I got appointed to the San Mateo Planning Commission in 2007, a couple years or so ago, and got elected to my first term as chairman of the San Mateo Commission a few months ago it was. And I actually thought that was a great honor to be elected San Mateo chairman, but it turns out that there's one of the commissioners there is very talkative, and the chairman has the job of reining this person in and trying to keep things on track in spite of this person's efforts to the contrary. So I think that is not exactly such a fun job to have. But
can I help you? Yeah. Why don't you do that, and I'll just give you the. I'll let you know, or whatever.
That's okay. Anyway, the other planning commission will meet about twice a month, sometimes more or less. Sometimes we'll have visits to the sites. And it's similar to the Pacifica Planning Commission in that we're responsible for essentially determining what development is allowed throughout the unincorporated areas of the county. We'll be responsible for going to the sites themselves, which could be anywhere from La Honda to the unincorporated areas of Redwood City, and learning about each issue and so on, and then making judgments on that. In addition to making the judgments on the individual projects, like a subdivision or a winery I'll talk about later, we also are responsible for introducing new ordinances. We had a green building ordinance that came to us recently, which is one of the big accomplishments we achieved last year. It was an ordinance that mandates that every new commercial development over 3,000 square feet in San Mateo County, unincorporated, will be subject to these requirements to have, there's a litany of things that green building encompasses, but things like using materials that are more friendly to the environment, using less energy in the construction and less energy once the building is done. So we passed this last year that is really making good strides as far as making the building in the county come out more environmentally sound. And again, we're one of the leaders in the state on that, and we're very proud of that. Let's see. I'm going to just, again, I was trying to think of things to talk about. I'm going to just touch on some of the most important issues that have come up in the county and that are coming up in the future. One is, just to start out with a development project that's been proposed. There's something called the Big Wave development, which is, of course, down near Mavericks. The development itself has nothing to do with surfing, but it's in the area and it's a catchy word, so I called it Big Wave. It's a development for disabled people. It's 70 housing units, basically. 50 of these housing units would be for disabled people, and 20 would be for their caretakers. And it's also to get this thing to make money, the developers are also including a proposal for 225,000 square feet of office development in a manufacturing zone. and this is again right down south of Devil's Slide. It's very close to us here. The offices would be in 50-foot tall, 3-story buildings, and so it would be a big development. And it's getting a lot of. You'll probably start to see more about it pretty soon because it's a big thing, and it's just coming. The EIR is going to be available. Environmental impact report that needs to be done for this will be available in about 2 months, and then you'll start to see, I think, a lot of interest generated because the ideas. They've got actually. Scott Holmes, I think a lot of you know Scott Holmes, who was a public works director for a long time here. He's one of the leading proponents of this project. He has a developmentally disabled daughter, and he's pushing this hard. The idea is, again, combine the need for housing for these people with the need to make money and bring those together. And they've got a lot of support and a lot of opposition already building. Again, it would be one of the, as you can guess, any big project on the coast. But the fact that it's developmentally disabled, I think, and it's such an obvious need here, is getting a lot of people lining up in support of it. By the way, as I go, if any have any questions on specific topics, please feel free to jump in.
Is that in Montero or Granada? Then is it on the west side of one or the east side of one?
I believe it's right near the airport, the Princeton area. I don't know specifically where it is, but it's right there, close to the airport, I believe, on the west side. I think it's in the coast.
West side of one.
Highway 1, yeah. So it's a big deal.
So it's not in Half Moon Bay.
Not in Half Moon Bay proper. We actually have only jurisdiction over the unincorporated areas.
Oh.
We don't touch the city of Pacifica. We come right up. Our jurisdiction stops right at the city limits of Pacifica. And again, Half Moon Bay is incorporated, but we take care of El Granada, Moss Beach, Princeton, Montero, and then everything south of Half Moon Bay.
That's within the coastal zone, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's within the coastal zone, which makes it.
Speak up, please.
Yeah, it's within the coastal zone, which makes it even more, of course, more challenging. I'm glad you asked that question. The coastal zone is, for those of you who don't know, the California Coastal Act, Prop 20, back in 1972, was passed by the voters as a way of protecting our coastland from our coastal areas from overdevelopment, from inappropriate development, from environmentally damaging development. And that established a coastal zone, which is, generally speaking, everything west of Highway 1.
It's 2,000 yards.
Yeah, 2,000 yards, and within
Except in Pacifica.
right, it's within cities at least. But it's the general idea, without to get into the specifics, is things that are west of Highway 1 or relatively close to the coast are subject to control by what is now called the Coastal Commission. And a Coastal Commission it's essentially a commission like us, like the Pacifica Planning Commission, like the San Mateo County Commission, but that's the next level up. If somebody doesn't like what we determine, they can appeal it eventually up to the Coastal Commission. They have the final say on everything, and they're the ones that set the policy at the highest levels. And there's a lot of people have a lot of opinions about them, but I think they've done a remarkable job in the past 30-something years, keeping our coast relatively pure. If you look at the coast of Northern California compared to a lot of other coasts around the country, it's amazing what they've done. The policies they put into place as far as concentrating development in certain areas, just to prevent sprawl, encouraging agricultural use, and a lot of other things like that. They also they require, but this is another thing that Barbara mentioned, they require each community to have a local coastal program. San Mateo County is currently working on a local coastal program, which is basically a urban planning document combined with a set of policies to enforce that. And we are, again, by requiring that of every county, San Mateo, etc., they can ensure that there's local control of the coast, but also that the issue is taken seriously by the state as well. So they've done quite a good job of that.
Excuse me, but it seems timely. I attended a supervisors meeting, or town hall meeting here about a month ago I attended a meeting that was with all the county supervisors in Half Moon Bay. It was regarding our local coastal plan, and there was a proposal from the coastal commission to alter that or modify that, and it was looking for public input as to their recommendations. A lot of those recommendations would impact this project, okay, the big wave project. So a lot of public input, like you said, from both sides came out and was very, very passionate about either for or against this particular project. And I was just wondering what your input would be on that. Because they were proposing to have no wells, no wells. They were limiting growth, okay, down from 70, somewhere around 75 single family a year, down to 40 some last a year. But also this low income housing projects like this, it would be that wasn't going to come into that. That was going to be part of that figure. It wasn't going to be outside of that figure for controlling growth. No wells, no septic tanks. It was very, very restrictive. The supervisors took a position at the next meeting that I went to basically reject the request by the Coastal Commission to modify the local coastal plan, and now they're in deliberations, I guess, trying to negotiate that out. How would that affect big waves if, from your perspective?
A great question, yeah. That issue is, I was just about to touch on that issue. What she's talking about is so San Mateo County is updating our local coastal program, coming up with a new plan. And one of the things that we want to do is we're trying to reduce the allowable number of units on the coast from 125, which is currently what's allowed, down to 75, which is a pretty big reduction in the available housing.
Is that per square mile?
That's for the whole mid-coast. Let's see, this is for the mid-coast area, I believe. Urban, we call it urban mid-coast, which is Montara, Moss Beach, El Granada, Princeton, that area.
But that's the Coastal Commission goes to the water's edge, is that right?
The Coastal Commission's jurisdiction includes the coastal zone, which is, you can think of it as a strip along the ocean.
Yeah, but as I say, that's to the edge, to the water's edge.
Oh, do they? You mean in the water?
Yeah.
That's
I think it's to the shoreline, isn't it?
Well, it's the high tide.
Mean high tide.
Mean high tide, I suppose. Well, they actually, I think they have jurisdiction over the easements, over the issues of the beach access. But that's this is land use planning, so I have no clue what happens in the water.
Well, no, but some places, like Los Angeles, they actually build right up there, but they have to build high to build the houses up so that when the tide is high, it comes in. That's why I asked to the water's edge.
I don't think there's no strip between where you can build on and the water, but the coastal commission does not have jurisdiction, so they can take care of everything basically. Anyway, so we're trying to reduce that number of housing units allowed to 75, which would put a crimp on obviously larger developments. Now, I believe that's an excellent question. I'm not sure the details, but I believe that first of all, the Coastal Commission itself, the staff wants to recommend that we reduce that to 40 units, even lower, which is well quite extreme, as you can guess. And the county thinks that reducing it from 125 to 75 is about right. But as far as the big wave, I think, and I'm not sure about this, but I'm pretty sure that something like that would be exempt somehow, and I'm not sure if it's because it's low income related or developmentally disabled related or part of the...
They are contributing to the sandbars contributing that our debt government affairs is that it was actually set aside. It wouldn't be part of that. The way the Coastal Commission wrote it, any low income housing would not be a part of that program. Okay, where before it's exempt. Now it's exempt from the program.
Okay. Dave?
I assume you're talking about 40 per year. Is that an annual?
40, yeah, annually.
And I'm curious, do you know how much is currently being built over the last 5-6 years?
It's roughly, it goes up and down with the economy, but it's never really been above 70 or 80. On the busy years, we get about 70. So our reduction from 125 to 75, when we're recommending, would be sort of just to make sure we didn't have a problem in the future, whereas the Coastal Commission staff recommendation down to 40 would really be restrictive.
My understanding is it's about 7,500 infill lots, okay, and that it would take then with the limits that the Coastal Commission is recommending, it would take 80 to 100 years to build out what has already been subdivided, okay, and as far as infill. The other is that they were proposing that retirement, that basically if you wanted to build, that you would end up having to, if you had a lot, you would end up buying another lot, or if you have in conjunction with each other, you're contiguous, you would retire one lot in order to build on one. Okay, so that was something else that was being, I know the supervisors were quite concerned about that and asking for information on it, so.
Yeah, that provision of the retirement, I don't know about that one.
Yeah, that was interesting.
But what's also interesting,
I'm finding myself a bit lost. Why 40 or 75 or 100? Is there some rationale for that, or other than picking it out of the east?
It's like a lot of numbers in life. We sort of do some research and then pick something out of a hat at random.
You do the research and just decide what you want.
Research, yeah, basically, so.
I'm not part of the San Mateo County Transportation Authority, and these type of measures are being put in place to help grapple with density population on the highways in addition to anything else, because we do have problems with commute traffic, and we will have more problems as the population grows. So we're trying to keep down, or they're trying to, not us, but they're trying to keep things down so that it won't hit as bad as it could hit.
Yeah, but the answer is basically we saw that things had been developing in the neighborhood of 60 or 70 units a year, and we didn't want to make it too restrictive. We wanted to put some sort of a meaningful limit on how fast things could grow, but not make it too restrictive. And I think the numbers of about 70 per year that we've been getting lately during good times was sort of a guideline. We didn't want to make it. We didn't want to cut back any big chunk of development. We wanted to make sure it didn't get too bad in the future. So, in one sense, it's arbitrary, but in another sense, there's rationale behind it. But I want to touch on the other thing you mentioned about using things like not allowing new wells or water hookups, that kind of thing. One thing that jurisdictions do quite a lot, which I had a problem with, is as a way of restricting land use growth, land use planning, or urban growth, residential growth, instead of doing it the straight up honest way and simply saying, well, either saying we'll only allow 70 houses, or we'll make these restrictions for this neighborhood, these restrictions for that. People will use other tools as a sort of way around the need to be honest about the restrictions they're doing. They'll simply now allow no new wells. They'll use some sort of a water moratorium to prohibit development. I don't think that's a very honest way of doing planning. I think it's a way of using some other. Yeah, it's a way of using some trick to get around what you really want to do. I mean, I'm all in favor of restricting development. I'm an environmentalist, a Sierra Club member, et cetera. I'm all in favor of that. But I think it should be done in an honest way. I think if we're going to restrict development for some reason because we just don't want so much development, let's say that, rather than saying we don't have the sewer capacity or whatever. So that goes to what you're saying.
Yes, I know in Montero that in all fairness, the people that are on a well are not using the system are still, I don't know if people are aware that they're paying heavy assessment fees to eventually be on a system. And it's really, I know it's very punitive. It's a big disclosure if you're selling a property in Montero to let people know what that's going to cost you, and you're not using the water. Because you're paid a very, I mean, we're talking thousands it's assessed onto your property taxes, and yet you're not even on the system. So and it's a way of reducing the overall change.
Yeah. Like I said, if they could be honest about it, I'd be happier with me. Okay, one of the one of the most interesting things we actually had was a winery. I want to talk about. There's a winery, Clos de la Tech Winery. It's I think a medium-sized winery up in the La Honda area. They wanted to expand. They were asking for rezoning of a large area of land, I think thousands of acres, all up along Skyline, up and down Skyline. Rezoned that to Scenic Winery was the title of their zone, which is, I think, creative title, but the idea was to take a lot of open space land that's currently just used for grazing and allow wineries on it, allow both vineyards and wineries themselves, which could have really changed the character of the whole Skyline area, because there's a lot of land up and down there, that's right now it's just hills, and you have a few wineries starting in, but to rezone that to allow larger wineries that can produce more, can really have made that into sort of a miniature Napa Valley. This issue came before us just a few months ago, and it's really one of the most significant issues that I've dealt with so far, the idea of having responsibility. Do we want to make that into, again, a Napa Valley area? We'll have more and more tourism going up and down Skyline, looking at the wineries, wine tasting, etc. It went back and forth for several months. Again, there's a lot of positions on either side of it. We ended up we decided against rezoning all that to be winery friendly, I guess you'd call it. It's still possible to build wineries up there, but we said no to making the whole thing, again, a miniature Napa Valley. I think it was the right choice. It would have changed that area too dramatically. This particular winery itself, though, they're still working on a small, good-sized expansion, and even on this one winery, let alone rezoning the whole area, there's huge issues come up. The main source of water for La Honda is located. One of the main sources of water is located right on this winery's land, and there's a lot of worry about impact of the growing winery on the quality of the water. Wondering if more irrigation on this winery site will spoil the water, or if it will cause any erosion or slope stability problems, and so on. It's one of these up there. There's a lot of people up on Skyline, like Pacifica, like Woodside, that care a lot about their environment. And whenever something comes along like this that could dramatically change things, it gets a lot of opposition out there, and that's what's happened in this case. We'll probably give them approval for a smaller version of the winery that they wanted, without getting the rezoning that they wanted. We'll probably come to some sort of compromise, but that'll be coming up within the next few months.
Chris, when they want to do that, don't they have to do some kind of a land survey? You're talking about erosion, and a lot of it is hilly, and if you don't plant it right, you're going to have terrible erosion. So does some kind of a land survey have to come with that? Is that part of your decision?
Yeah. They have the applicant. There's a lot of burden on the applicant, as anyone who's in the business knows. A lot of burden on the applicant to provide studies, hire consultants, geological consultants, anything you can think of, all sorts of engineers and scientists, to determine whether or not these problems are real. Determine the effect on the water quality, the effect on the stability, and so on. So yeah, they hire that. They'll usually hire a consultant. The county will have a reviewing system where we hire our own geologists to review it. Same with the city as well. But yeah, it's a big burden, but it's necessary. This next one, the Pilarcitos Quarry, I wanted to mention briefly. It's funny though. Supposedly, I have these notes that we talked about, that we studied something on the Pilarcitos Quarry last year, and it was in this article about the commission, about myself in the Tribune, and I simply have no memory of this. Which I think, I don't know.
Not my article, somebody else.
I think it's like, I was reading this article about me, and it contained quotes that I was saying, and I have no recollection of saying these things.
Again, not my article.
I'm sure I said them and simply forgot about it. But just briefly, the noteworthy thing about it was a Pilarcitos Quarry, apparently, although I don't remember, wanted to expand. And I'm using this as an example of the kinds of things that the county can do as part of the planning process as a tool to help encourage environmental preservation, encourage good development. We essentially negotiated with the owner of the quarry to scale back what they wanted to do with their quarry, to scale back the expansion they had in mind. And we turned down their expansion until it was smaller, and then in exchange we included a provision that obligated them to put a large amount of the land to devote that to open space, which is the kind of thing that it's the kind of thing that you can do in the planning process, essentially exchanging development or expansion rights for open space that benefits the whole community, the whole county. And this was a classic example of that. And it was just, yeah, we'll give you a little less what you wanted, and you give us some open space, and that's that. And it works fine for everyone now. They won't get the development they wanted, but they'll get something, and again, the people get the open space. Another example of something we can do is the Williamson Act. It's a Land Conservation Act. Barbara knows a lot about this through her work on the grand jury as well. It was originated back in the 60s, but I guess you'd say it's being updated now because there's some legal issues involving it. There's some controversy a couple of years ago where we weren't enforcing it well enough. But the idea is to enter into contracts with landowners down the coast where they agree to keep their land agricultural as opposed to developing it. And in exchange, we give them tax breaks, so they have a much lower tax rate. It's one of the better tools I think that we have. So we have over 350, almost 400 contracts with landowners up and down the coast there, where they agree to keep it agricultural. Of course, there's a pretty big cost to the tax rolls. I mean, you can imagine if we allow all that to develop, we're going to get more and more taxes. So it is controversial to some extent. But I think in the case of the coast where the land is so precious, there's only so much coastal land. I think there's generally pretty good public support for keeping that as open space agricultural as much as possible. And there was the issue that came up in 2007. I think this is what Barbara was mentioning as well in her little blurb, was that the county wasn't complying with the act well enough, where some of the landowners were apparently using their land for other purposes and still getting the tax breaks. And so we're trying to get them to comply better. Do you have any more to say about that?
I can't.
Yeah. Okay, that's right. Well, I can say whatever I want.
Yeah, that's why I want you to talk.
Okay. And so if I say something wrong, can you tell me it's wrong? You can't even say that.
I don't know.
You mean we have no control over these people except to give them tax breaks? Other than that, they can go ahead and build on it or whatever?
No, it's a good question. It's a very good question. I'm not sure of the details of that. I mean, I think what Earl is saying is, why don't we simply zone this whole area agricultural? And it is to a large extent, I think, and again, I wish Barbara could speak, because she probably knows this better than I do.
It's a very unusual situation being an ex-grand juror, because the judge tells you that there's a lot of stuff you can't speak to directly if you've heard it in testimony.
So she's just going to be sitting there wishing she could jump in and tell the truth instead of my guesstimate of the truth. But I think the bottom line is, I think agricultural zoning can go so far, and this arrangement, I think it may be either to protect properties from being rezoned, perhaps they're to it's some sort of a voluntary zoning.
That's what I said. We have no control over them rezoning it for something else. Then if we don't give them tax breaks,
we have control. But again, I wish I knew the details. And this is one of those things that I didn't come really well versed in to talk about the details. And I don't know why. Yeah,
I can give maybe my impression of what I heard, and that is that because we're warned, again, for disclosure reasons, is for selling agricultural property, to be really careful if it's being advertised with under the Williamson Act, because those benefits of tax breaks are being passed on, but yet the land was not being used, it didn't meet the criteria any longer. You're supposed to be producing some type of either farming or animals, something. You're supposed to be meeting that in order and producing and selling, and anyway, large estates were being done, and where it's just homes and the land, but they weren't producing anything, and they really should not be getting those kind of tax breaks. So yes, I know Santa Clara, my understanding is that Santa Clara County just had a whole big revision and really found a lot of abuses and a lot of tax revenue that was lost.
I would like to add that if you go on the internet to the County San Mateo Superior Court Grand Jury, 2008 to 2009, all of the reports that we have just written are published there. And the Williamson Act investigation and the reason why it came before us will be there. It's about, is it 21 or 23 pages? I don't know. There's so many reports that I've written this year, I don't know anymore. But the point is that it's a very interesting reading. So again, that's the Grand Jury website.
Was that information reasonably accurate what I just gave, Barbara?
Yes, I think so.
And Chris, just yesterday, I was at a meeting or at the dinner in San Mateo, and I came home by Highway 1, because sometimes that's fun to do and it's still there. And I was very surprised, so I think it's working. I think you are getting more farmers to actually use their land to produce. On the east side of Highway 1, it was past Half Moon Bay, it was right around where all those big flower seed places are. But there's some land closer to Highway 1 that has always just sort of sat there, and it wasn't being grazed. There weren't any fences. I mean, and I always thought, wow, what a waste! This isn't being used. They must have been getting a tax break, but not using it to plant, because now it's planted.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It was acres and acres and acres of like a truck garden kind of thing. You know, I thought we're going to see this stuff at the farmers market, and it hadn't been there before. It wasn't there last year.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good chunk of it right there, is that it's not, the idea of this Williamson Act isn't just to keep it from being developed, it's to actually keep it in viable agricultural use. So if something is zoned agricultural, that doesn't mean you are forced to grow stuff on it. But if you want the tax break, you actually have to, in fact, that's part of the issue now. I'm not sure if it's what the grand jury is.
You mean to tell me then that they would just let that land, if we didn't give them the tax break, they'd just let it go to waste or whatever?
It would sit there. It wouldn't be used
They
for
still get
commercially
tax break,
viable.
but they sit there.
Part of the abuse that's occurring to the Williams in this issue is that developers would get or landowners would get the tax break and just let their land sit there not being used.
And it's a pretty substantial tax break.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. So the idea is actually, again, not just to keep it from development, but to keep it a real farm.
So you're trying to stop the abuse.
Right.
Part of the national problem, I had uncles who were farmers in Kansas, and I remember as a little girl going, and they would fuss and fuss their neighbors who were taking the money from the government not to plant. And then they wouldn't plant, not to plant a certain thing, because it was an oversupply of whatever it was, corn, wheat, whatever it was that year. But then they wouldn't plant anything. But they take the tax break and they go on a trip somewhere. And my uncles just were furious. Why would anybody, first of all, let your land sit there and not be used? I mean, a farmer farms, or at least use it for grazing something, you know. But they were just livid that these people were rooking the government by taking the money and not planting some other crop that was needed. Yeah. Instead, they were just doing nothing and taking the money, making more than they could have made if they planted whatever and sold it and at a lower price, you know. Yeah. So it's an abuse that you don't always know was an abuse, you know, unless you're actually on land.
I've always been told that the only stupid question is Dan asked one, and I hope you forgive me if this is off base, but going back to the previous subject, where you say you trade off, like you can build on this lot, but you have to keep this lot open space. It wouldn't take a rocket scientist for a developer or an individual to figure out what you were going to say and then ask for more than what they wanted. How do you decide what the county should actually demand of that property before trading off for something?
It doesn't take a rocket scientist. That's a pretty standard technique. Although, and you'd be amazed how few people actually understand that. We see it from the planning perspective, we see it a lot, where a developer will, if I were a developer, I would come in asking for 300 houses on my property and gradually negotiate down, because the opposition will always compare how well they do, how effective they've been at knocking you down. They'll take your highest number and try to get that down. So if I really wanted to build 20, I'd start with 300, and then everyone would be happy. If I wanted to build 20 and I started with 20, I'd get cut down to 5. So the answer is there's, again, it's not a satisfactory answer to your question, but there are, as far as a specific issue, as far as trading off and so on, there actually are some guidelines. I'm sure I don't know exactly what they're used. I think that was something Susan had mentioned. The specifics of that program, I don't know,
But there are some baseline.
Yeah, the baseline
guidelines to determine that you don't trade away the whole fund.
Right, yeah.
Chris?
Yeah.
Regarding the Williamson Act, didn't the governor just stop that tax break?
Really?
Yeah, I think, well, it's in that, the one with the Steinbergers, I'm not sure if he's suing over that one or not. But
Stop completely. Well, I defer
but
to you, certainly.
you know how you get that list of forever changing?
Yeah.
But I believe I did see the Williamson Act in there. That would
That's
be,
fascinating.
so that would have been just a week ago.
I've not heard anything about it. You're presumably right. So, in that case, disregard everything I just said.
Well,
No, I'm not sure what it is. If there's some sort of conditions on it, or if they're stopping completely, or whatever. But it's certainly that would be big news, and I'd be interested. In fact, if you find more on that, if you could email me or something, I'd like
Let
to.
me see if I still have it.
Can I?
Yeah.
I would caution everyone to understand that everything is in a state of flux in Sacramento. So anything that stopped last week may start up a month from now. So don't take that as if there's no problems. I would ask you to go to the Superior Court's website, Grand Jury 2008, 2009, to find out about a whole lot of problems in San Mateo County.
Chris, you mentioned something about a coastal development group being formed in the county.
Local coastal program.
The LCP, the Local
LCP.
Coastal Plan.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about mine.
How do you get on a mailing list for that?
I would check with
The Board of Supervisors.
Board of
Check with the Board of
Supervisors,
Supervisors.
yeah, with Planning Department or Board of Supervisors, they can direct you. It's what it is it's
How do you say that again, local?
local coastal program. It's what it is they're at the input stage now, where they're getting input. I believe a committee with representatives from all around the county, different interests. I think.
It's also known as the LCP, which is the Local Coastal Plan. So
Yeah, the local coastal program is local coastal plan LCP. The plan is an element of the local coastal program, which
Right.
makes everything work. Okay?
Pacifica does have its own local coastal plan, and you can go to our planning department and tell them to be on the list if any changes or anything comes up to be on a mailing list. There is
Yeah.
one for our town as well.
That's right. Thanks, Dave. Yeah. So if you're interested in the county-wide, you would contact the Board of Supervisors in Redwood City. If you're interested in the city of Pacifica, you can call the planning department.
Yeah,
And
of course I know
Chris,
that.
there's also the Association of the Bay Area Governments, ABAG. I think on their website, they might deal with the Mid-County LCP information. I'm not sure, but I think they might. ABAG.
Yeah. They should certainly be involved. The local coastal program is we've been working on it for about 2 years now, and we're, I think, aiming for, let's see, yeah, probably this will probably be going to the full Coastal Commission in December. In the meantime, it's sort of at a local, or in the county level. But we cover infrastructure and public services, for example, how transportation will be dealt with, not just cars and buses, bikes, pedestrians.
Well, when that report comes out, if I call you, would you get me a copy of it?
I can certainly direct you. Please, yeah, I'd be happy to hear from you. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I'd like to comment on Pacifica's coastal status relative to the coastal zone. I'm not sure how many of you know this, but when the Coastal Commission was formed, the late Grace McCarthy was a member of the original commission. And when they formed the zone, 2,000 yards, which, if you think about it, it's like 2 football fields. And the single exception in the state of California is Pacifica. And Pacifica is Highway 1. Well, you and I we all know that there are places where there isn't any coastal zone here, through Lindemar, for example, where the highway sits on the beach. And the only, I always oppose development in the quarry lands for the simple reason it's the only stretch of coastal land within that coastal zone that we have left. There isn't anywhere that Highway 1 is 2,000 yards from the ocean. And that's the only stretch we have left that's not already trashed or developed in Pacifica.
200 yards or 2,000?
2,000.
2 football fields is
2,000.
200 yards.
I'm sorry, 2,000.
20 football fields.
20 football fields.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so, and that's, let's see, the coastal, one other thing about Coastal Commission, it was established in 1972 again. The Coastal Commission is making an increasing effort to be involved with local issues more directly, to have them. In the past, we've had a problem, both in Pacifica as well as in San Mateo, where the Planning Commission did one thing, and then it would get appealed up to the Coastal Commission through the process of appeal, and they would simply come up to, they wouldn't have the local background, they'd come up with a different decision and would not seem to necessarily respect the local authorities, the local decisions as much. Well, in fact, just last week, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but there was a Coastal Commission did have, we went to a Coastal Commission meeting in the city addressing this issue, and there's sort of a resolution made for the Coastal Commission to indeed try to have more dialogue with the local commissions, the local planning staff, local elected officials, and so on. I don't know if Sue, you may have some, I don't know if you're aware, if you had any.
I was not able to attend that meeting, no.
Yeah, but it was, the idea is, again, there's sort of this ongoing conflict where the Coastal Commission is seen as this big thing in Sacramento that overturns everything else. And the idea is to try to increase the communication between Sacramento and localities, and I think that's very important. Just a couple of the little issues. One of the big issues that's come before us now is watershed protection. There's always a conflict between adding more and more regulations to any development as far as impervious surfaces. For example, when a builder wants to build something, say down Pescadero or whatever, there's a tendency for either the commission or the government to insist on, say, driveways that will, instead of just causing runoff into the watershed, will actually absorb, the water can go through it, they'll absorb the water, it'll go directly down into the soil then, and that'll make the watershed, reduce watershed problems. So there are standards that the state has for those, and we're working on essentially trying to get a little more strict than the state standards without being too strict to be unreasonable. And that's the kind of back and forth that you see going on at our level. We're trying to put regulations in place as much as we need to without unfairly burdening someone with unreasonable requirements. That's one of our issues there. The last big issue I want to talk about, and then I'll talk about my Joan Baez anecdote, which is my highlight of my time on the commission. There's something called the Highlands. It's an unincorporated area near Hillsborough, just on the edge of Hillsborough, that I think is, in one sense, is a classic example of what we talked about, a developer. They first proposed over 100 houses there decades ago, and it gradually got scaled down to 80, to 50, to 25, and now they're proposing 11 houses on huge lots of acreage, big area. Of course, even at 11 houses, since this is right next to Hillsborough, there's all sorts of opposition. There's so much opposition, we actually moved our planning commission meeting, instead of having it in City Hall or in County Building, we actually moved the commission meeting out to a community center in their neighborhood. and we had like, I think, 150 people out there telling us, how there's no geological studies, the whole hillside is going to come crumbling down, and this doesn't fit in the neighborhood. Well, of course, any new building could be said not to fit in the neighborhood that's there now, so there's a lot of opposition that way. Geotechnical stability has been a huge issue there. We actually have gotten so involved in the geotech studies there that we've commissioned a special study where instead of just simply drilling down into the dirt, we're actually drilling a big hole and then lowering a guy down there to scrape away. Because things go much farther than they would in the Pacific. When you're talking about even 11 homes next to Hillsborough with all this opposition, you have to be so careful as to get every teaspoonful of dirt and make sure that the liquefaction potential is blah, 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 blah. So that's a challenge.
And the county pays for all of this special treatment?
No, the county pays for the peer reviews. We have to review everything. We hire geologists to check it all, but the county mandates how much they have to do, and then the developer will, of course, pay for the guy going down the hole with a teaspoon, and then the county pays for a geologist to review it, basically. But it's tough there. I mean, there are a lot of areas in the county that are like Hillsborough and Woodside where there's lots. I mean, Pacifica has a lot of organized opposition, which is wonderful as part of the process. But there are parts in the county that are, in some ways, even more organized because there's more people with more at stake there. It's huge. There's one other thing that Barbara mentioned I was going to talk about that I actually have no clue about, and someone else has more. Post. Do you want to hear?
No.
Peninsula Open Space Trust. It's one of the things that I heard of and know a little about. If anybody, like Sue or someone, if you know about Post, if you want to say just a few words on Peninsula Open Space Trust. In that case, I'll let it slide because no one seems to care.
I think they're the largest landowner on the peninsula.
Yes.
Yeah, that's about the extent I know of that too. So my highlight was meeting Joan Baez on it. So ever since the 60s, I've loved Joan Baez, right? I've been on the commission just a few months, and I was sitting there at one end of the dais, fussing with my notes, and then I heard the chairman say, okay, the subject was a horse park in Woodside. And I heard the chairman say, the next speaker, Joan Baez. And the name jumped out at me, and I'm kind of thinking, so it's like, you don't know what to expect. So I was convinced, she must be John Baez. I couldn't believe it was like, John Baez. So she's talking about John Baez. It must be some name that sounds like Joan Baez. So I just didn't pay attention, kept writing notes. And sure enough, Joan Baez walks up to the podium and starts talking about this horse park across from her house. Yes, it was her. So, and I wanted to just tell everyone, don't you guys realize this is a legend? Joan Baez is talking to us. And everyone was listening to her all seriously as if she wasn't some superstar or something. I was quite starstruck. During the meeting, I made a point of being very serious and asking her serious questions and referring back to what Ms. Baez had said about this issue, but I kept wanting to get up and scream and tell everyone. I did after the meeting, I did make a point.
After your anecdote, I wanted to add something.
I did, after the meeting, I made a point of going up to her and saying how much I was appreciative of her music, and I think she appreciated that as well. But the funniest part of it is when she came up to us at that first meeting, she was protesting against the horse park because I have no clue why. She just said vote against it, so of course I voted against it. Then we sent it back for revisions, and it came back to us a couple months later with the revisions, and she came up again, and she said, I'm satisfied with the revisions. I'm in favor of this project, so of course I voted for it. You can see how easy it is to bind my vote.
I just wanted to add that Chris and I seem to have a little similar anecdotes because when I was covering the Board of Supervisors back in November of 2007 for some other issue, I got there late. It was the first time I'd been to the board in I don't know, years, and so I was trying to get, well, where do I sit? And two women took me under their wing, and they gave me the information, and they just more or less were my tutors for about a half hour to 45 minutes. And like Chris, when they called Joan Baez, she gave me her purse, and she got up and Joan Baez. And the last time I had seen Joan Baez in person was like 1966, and she had hair down to here, and this little lady, and of course she looked bigger than life. But this time, and she's still a very attractive woman, but now she's a Woodside matron, as it were, and she like shrunk and just so petite, and I couldn't get over it. So it's interesting that we Pacificans would be both entertained by Joe Biden's report at the planning commission.
And she was on the news today because 40 years of since Woodstock. And she was 28 at Woodstock.
Yeah.
And so she was talking about her experience this morning.
Is she 30 yet?
She's 30. This is 68. She looks darn good for 68. I hope I look that good when I'm 68.
You will. You will.
Thank you, Jack. Good.
Well, my question is kind of boring in this, but anyway, I have a question about the impervious material for roads or driveways.
That's the way I talk about Joan Baez.
I have a Joan Baez story.
What?
I have a Joan Baez story. When I was in college forever, I worked at the Fairmont Hotel at the same time. And when Joan Baez came to register at the hotel, there was a phone in with a phony name, and I put her on suspicious watch list.
Of course you did, Catherine. We have no doubt.
We sorted it out when she checked in.
Okay, I guess now we can go with the previous.
What I want to know is, did she sing her comments?
No, she didn't. I was very disappointed.
But the thing is, when you know somebody that is that iconic, I couldn't help, I don't know what the subject was they were talking about at the meeting, because I kept on putting her back with her long hair, and thinking of the song she used to sing, and I realized that I was missing out on what I was
Joan Baez comments.
No, it isn't.
Let's go to the pervious. This is actually serious.
I live in a townhouse complex at the top of Vassar, and we're like right on the cliff, right? We're on the edge, and we just rebuilt our road, and I asked someone, why didn't we do the pervious stuff? And they said, because we were on the hill, that allowing the water to go down through the pavement would make the ground underneath less stable. So instead, they made sure that it drained and goes back out on the path, because it wasn't going out there as well as it should from the original design. So are there cases when the pervious material is not the right choice?
The specifics, I don't know the details of the specifics, but the point is, the broader point is that there are a lot of these cases where what seems like the obvious scientific solution is not so obvious. Again, that comes up a lot with, we'll get public opposition to a project based on what seems to be pretty obvious science from a layman's perspective, but it turns out that the truth is not that way at all. This is one reason I tend to rely quite heavily on engineers and scientists for these issues, rather than trying to solve things sort of more layman level. I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm pretty sure that you're right, and that it is more complex than it would seem.
Chris?
What, hang on. What is the, on the green building county ordinances that you mentioned, what is the commercial, is it LEED rating or is it higher than LEED?
I think it's like gold LEED or something, 50 points.
Gold rather than platinum.
I believe it's gold, yeah. Platinum is, of course, optional. And it's for everything over 3,000 square feet.
Yeah. I saw an article on it, and I thought it said platinum, and I thought, oh, boy, that's high.
Platinum, I think, is 100. You may know more, Dave, but platinum is... So for those who don't know, there are different levels of how green you are. There's gold and silver, platinum, whatever they are. But this ordinance we have is basically just the minimum, which is a start anyway. You had a question? Sure.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of go back to that pervious driveways to explain the importance of this. What happens happens with development is you have directed runoff. Instead of rain, storms soaking into the hillsides, the water's directed, and this creates erosion. And this is why our, for example, San Pedro Creek is no longer shaped like this, and is now shaped like this, a V, a deep V. It gets deeper and deeper, where normally it would be a shallow creek with a broad floodplain. And that directed running is constantly eroding not only the creek, but hillsides, everything. This is how come our hills slide, is because we're directing runoff into specific areas. And the concrete does this. And the idea that they have a pervious material would allow more water to soak into the land, and that would also be good for sidewalks, and I'd sure like to know what that is.
Yeah, I know the city of Pacifica's discussed that some. I don't know the exact details of when it's more appropriate than others on when the.
In Valimar, they have it. If you build in Valimar, you have to do a pervious material sidewalk where there are no sidewalks. So if you build one house, you may have a sidewalk of pervious material just for that house, and then nothing on the other side of it. And also the big complex on the top of Gateway,
Is that pervious too?
they are making them, in order to turn that into condominiums, they have to do all pervious materials for their driveways, redo their driveways, and their parking area with pervious materials.
Yes, there's a notice outside there about the restaurant closing down, and the only reason I'm mentioning that is because it's the first stage of getting rid of the golf course, which I think is a stupid thing to do. If Pacifica doesn't take it over, then we've lost our minds. And there's a notice outside there on a board, on a blackboard, that'll tell you where to sign in. It's a petition to keep it open, whatever. And I don't. What? Yeah. Well, the restaurant's the first thing. The first thing. Newsom wants to close it according to what it says there. You can read the notice outside there. And I just wanted to throw a little bit of minutiae in here. The Joan Rivers, they were worried they gave her a mammogram, but they had to take a picture of the top of her head to get it. You'll catch on in a minute.
Okay.
So they're closing the restaurant? They're closing this restaurant
Yes.
permanently?
When is this going to happen?
There's been, Sue probably knows more than I do, but they've been talking about the possibility of San Francisco taking over this. Well, this is owned by San Francisco. San Francisco wants to do something else with their golf course, basically. And the question is whether they're going to or not.
Well,
I think
we have to all keep fighting that.
Pardon?
Fighting for the golf course.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, both Sue and I are on the city's golf task force. And, I mean, I just recently was in San Francisco at a meeting with San Francisco. I hadn't heard anything about the Sharp Park restaurant being shut down. Is there a definite date that has been cited here?
There's a notice out there that'll explain it. That there's a petition, and Gavin Newsom wants to close the restaurant.
Question?
I was just curious about the winery project.
Yeah.
I like that one. I think it'd be kind of neat, you know. I'm just wondering what might come out of that, something like one or two new wineries, or what is that? Or they just want to put more growing, more crops in? And then has anybody sort of floated the idea or looked like they may want to have an outdoor concert type thing up there by any chance?
I've never heard that idea, no. I've never
Yeah,
heard
winery.
Mountain Wine, yeah. Why not? They have one in Marin.
And in Saratoga.
And
Yeah,
Sarasota,
it's,
yeah.
Saratoga. It's
I've never
another
heard that
nice one.
idea. Who knows? I mean, it's a little bit up in the woods, but people like that sometimes. Maybe so. I've never heard that. But as far as the winery, it's I think there'll still be some small wineries going in, small vineyards and wineries. But the idea of rezoning it, because they are allowed with approval. The idea of rezoning a large swath of the whole Skyline area to allow wineries, which would have really encouraged a whole mess of them going in without any additional approval. That was what we turned down, basically. But yeah, there's still an opening for more and more small wineries, and I think gradually over time we'll see a few more of that if they're economically viable. Yeah, that's all the material I have. Any other questions on any of the subjects or anything, feel free.
You probably won't see any new wineries going in recently, soon, because the price of grapes is so low. The crop is so good, did you hear that? Crop is so good this year, that the price is gonna be really low, so wineries and winemakers are all upset, but for us, wine is gonna be much cheaper. All the good stuff is gonna be cheaper, because there's gobs and gobs. I'm surprised they weren't talking about not picking or just during crop, because they were so upset that they had too much. In this economy, who has too much of anything? So I was like, oh, this is too much.
$1, Chuck?
Yeah.
$1. There we go.
So I don't suppose there'll be any new wine videos being planted until the price goes back up, but.
Susan?
I read the notice outside, and it's basically saying, asking you to sign a petition to say the restaurant and golf course is being sent to Gavin Newsom. That's what they're asking you to do.
Oh, okay, then basically it sounds as if
And
it's
it's
the
online.
same, it's
It's
the
an
same
online
issue
one.
we've been
Yeah.
grappling with for every other day.
They're just so good.
It's not just pinpointing the risk.
They're just different.
Where is it?
The notice will show you directly outside. It's on a chalkboard.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question. My question is, who has the sign-up sheet for the Fog Fest in front of them? Right here. Okay, has everyone seen the sign-up sheet for the Fog Fest? Because it's going to happen next month, and it's broken into 2 days, and with 2-hour shifts and 4 shifts in a day, 3 people to a shift. If you can help us, we would ask that you join us and sign up on this sheet if you would today.
Lori asked me to tell you he'll sign up for 2 shifts, but he didn't, he'll have to do it later, okay?
Okay, very good.
And we're trying to have the Democrats booth next to the library, again, like it was last year. It's very convenient for those who are after the cross.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, it's not changed that.
How about parking?
Parking?
Yeah, I mean, the last time